Hi, I want to talk about our kids and how sometimes when you have a child with disabilities, you tend to not know what to expect and what's normal, what's not normal. And sometimes things can be a little frightening to not know what's going on or if things are okay. Um, First and foremost, every kid is different. All four of mine have different qualities, different strengths, different personalities, and that is going to be the same for everyone else. So just because your child isn't doing something or is doing something does not mean that's not normal or that is extra special. It just means your kid has a different personality. And sometimes we tend to overanalyze. Uh, like if your child is doing something that you've never seen before, and whether it's something with their hands, something with their mouth, uh, just something that's just different. Sometimes it's just they discovered that they could do that and they're having fun with that. I know with my kids, when they discovered they could do certain noises or they could accomplish a certain thing with their fingers or hands, or they could do something physically, they would keep doing it and doing it and doing it because it's a fun thing. They just figured it out. So don't think it's a seizure right away. Just look at the whole picture. Is your child in distress? Is something going downhill? You have to think of other possibilities before reacting to a situation. It's real easy to do, especially if you only have one and that's all you think about all day is your child. You know they have disabilities and you're wondering, is this normal or not normal? And I don't know what to do. And you reach out to, social media and you're going to get some crazy advice. And the thing is, unless it's something that's really out of this world, like bad, or you've got a lot of different factors and it looks bad, reach out to your doctor first. I know it's easy to go to social media and ask, and sometimes it's good advice, but most of the time you might just be overreacting because you only have one and you just don't know what's typical and what's not typical. And we're all guilty of it. But me, I wasn't like that because my kids were little and I didn't really have, I wasn't on Facebook. I didn't have these groups and whatnot to ask questions. Plus, I had all four of mine close together, and I was too busy to do any posting or any looking on social media at that point because I had 6 kids in the house, and I was married and have a couple dogs, a couple cats, and I've been busy. But I know it's very easy to do that if you only have one to look at. And just rest assured, unless something's really bad, just don't worry about it. I mean, all of us have different personalities. They just learn things at different paces. And for the general population, unless things go downhill, like I keep repeating, don't worry about every little thing because these kids are very curious and they want to know what they're capable of. They might see something and they're trying to mimic it, and that's all it simply is. It's just a little thing that they've learned to do and whatnot. And incidentally, a lot of things aren't seizures that look like seizures. I know my daughter, she was having this arm thing. The best way I could describe it, it was shaking her arm and her fingers seemed to bend like the opposite direction and they were tremoring. And I kept telling the neurologist about this because it didn't look right, and they just kind of ignored me, and finally I made enough noise about it, and I had her go to the hospital and hooked her up to an EEG, a video EEG, and she was doing these things on a regular basis. So you would press the button, they'd mark it, and whatnot. Long story short, the doctor, I didn't like him. He was an he was an epileptic doctor. I can't remember the exact term, but he specializes in seizures. And he was telling me, oh, none of that seizures. Maybe you could take her to a psychiatrist. And at first, when I came home, I was really just bothered by that, because I was like, what the heck? Psychiatrist? She can't talk to anyone. And I was really offended by that. And here, what it really came down to, I learned later, is that that was her way of dealing with something that was making her anxious. That was her body's way of reacting to something anxious. And if the anxiety went higher, she would definitely go into seizure, but they weren't seizures. And that's why he made that comment, psychiatrist, that maybe you want to put her on an anxiety medicine. But I didn't know it at the time. They weren't very clear with me. But the movements that I kept seeing were not seizures. They were just my child's way of responding to anxiety. And so keep that in mind too, that sometimes you'll see something and that's just your child's way of coping with the situation that's making them anxious. It doesn't necessarily mean a seizure. Just remind yourself what a seizure looks like. It's when your child's pretty much not responsive, won't make any kind of acknowledgement you're talking to them, and their body is trembling. I know there's partial seizures out there. I've seen those where your child could be kind of conscious but can't do anything you're asking them to do. So that's a seizure, a partial seizure. So I had my daughter, she had a partial seizure, and you could talk to her and she could respond, but her rest of her body couldn't do what you were asking her to do. So if I asked her, can you wave to me, and she would just smile, and her body couldn't do that. But in the big picture, just remember that not everything's a seizure. Sometimes the kids are just discovering new things they could do, and other times it's just an anxiety moment, like my daughter doing her little arm movement where it was shaking, and that was just her anxiety, and that was her coping mechanism. And if the anxiety went higher, that's when she would go into seizure. And that's my best advice for all of you parents that have just one or just a couple with no typical, or experiencing this for the first time and really unsure about stuff. This is my advice to you. I hope you enjoyed watching.